The subject vehicle continued to accelerate toward the exit, in the process narrowly missing other police vehicles and officers. Officer Robert Radowskovic, who was a driver, and Officer Scott Sistek, who was a passenger, parked their marked Cleveland Police Department cruiser in the access drive, partially blocking the subject vehicle's exit route. As Officer Sistek exited the passenger door, he looked up to find the subject vehicle traveling directly toward him. He estimated it to be only 15 feet away. He told investigators that he feared he was about to be struck, and so, while running backwards, began firing his weapon at the driver through the windshield of the subject vehicle. The subject vehicle did, in fact, strike Sistek's open passenger door, slamming it shut and collapsing a portion of the passenger side of that cruiser. Upon reaching the rear of his cruiser, Officer Sistek stated that he went to the ground for cover, remaining in this position until all following shots ceased. He learned after the Cleveland Police Department Homicide Unit inventoried his remaining ammunition that he had fired 12 times. Investigators believe Sistek to be the second officer to discharge his weapon. Detective William Salupo, who was on foot to the rear of the subject vehicle, observed the subject vehicle strike cruiser 238 with the subject vehicle's engine continuing to rev. He heard gunfire and saw Officer Sistek go to the ground, incorrectly believing that Sistek had been run over by the subject vehicle and that he was trapped beneath it. As a result, Detective Salupo reported that he fired 2 rounds through the back window of the subject vehicle towards the driver. Salupo said that he then sensed bullets were coming towards him, bullets that he believed were coming from the subject vehicle, but in reality were likely bullets being fired from officers positioned on the opposite side of the subject vehicle. He took cover, having fired 2 rounds. Officer Cynthia Moore, who was with her partner Officer Michael Brelow, in their Cleveland Police Department cruiser 217, also saw the subject vehicle strike cruiser 238. She said that she could see 2 subjects in the vehicle and what she thought were guns pointed at her. She also said that immediately following this observation, she heard shots being fired, believing the subjects were firing at her. She returned fire through the windshield of her own cruiser. Thinking she was being shot at, Moore then exited the passenger side of her cruiser and was standing next to it, still firing. She said shots were still being fired and that a lot of people were yelling and that the shooting was going on, in her words, forever. Officer Moore said that glass was flying at her, furthering her belief that the subject vehicle was shooting at her. During the incident, she said she was scared and trying, and quote, trying not to get killed. Officer Brelow told investigators that he drove to the right of cruiser 238 and stopped his car along the access route to the staff parking lot. He said that the subject vehicle then began to come towards him, leading him to believe that his vehicle was about to get rammed. Brelow said that he could see both occupants in the subject vehicle, with both of them pointing dark objects at the officers in a manner consistent with how one normally holds a gun. He said he then heard shots being fired from the area of the subject vehicle, at which point he drew his weapon and shot through his own windshield into the subject's windshield. Brelow said, "I've never been so afraid in my life. I thought my partner and I were being shot at and that we were going to be killed." End of quote. Officer Brelow reloaded in his vehicle after believing his weapon had jammed. He stated that after reloading, he still believed that he was being shot at and that the subject vehicle was going to ram him. He told investigators that he exited his cruiser because he was terrified the subject vehicle was going to hit him. As he moved, he fired additional rounds at the subject vehicle until his magazine was empty, reloading a second time. Officer Brelo told investigators further that for various reasons, including to avoid crossfire by achieving a higher angle, to avoid being hit by the subject vehicle, to avoid stepping into the line of fire of other officers, to use the passenger compartment as cover, to avoid the engine block of the subject vehicle from stopping his rounds, and to gain elevation. Based upon his Marine infantry training, Officer Brelo climbed on top of Cruiser 238 and fired downward into the subject vehicle through the windshield, eventually then stepping across and firing from the hood of the subject vehicle itself. Brelo stated to our investigators, "I keep hearing rounds go off. I see the suspects moving, and I couldn't understand why they are still moving, shooting at us." He continued, "I never have been so afraid in all my life, and I just couldn't understand why the suspects were still moving and still shooting at us." Brelo stated that he was more fearful during this incident than he ever was during his military service while deployed in Iraq. After the shooting ceased, Officer Brelo put the subject vehicle in park and removed the keys. Investigators located 49 casings from the scene that matched his weapon. Officer Brian Sobolik told investigators that as he and his partner, Officer Michael Farley, arrived, the gunfire had already started. Officer Sobolik said that ahead of him he saw a cloud of smoke and kept hearing gunshots. He said that as his field training officer, Farley, got out of the car, he remembered what they had taught him in the academy, to get out of the car because, quote, "the car is a coffin," end of quote. Sobolik got out of the car, telling investigators that he believed he was directly in the suspect's line of fire. He shot 2 rounds and began running back behind his police car for cover. He retreated to the driver's side of his patrol car, firing 2 additional rounds from that location. Upon his weapon being inventoried after the incident, it was determined that he fired 4 rounds. Officer Farley described the scene as, quote, "the scariest thing that I've ever seen in my whole life," end of quote. As he got out of his car, he realized that he had not put on his bulletproof vest because he had been working out and had just left it on the front seat. Officer Farley said that as he exited his car, he thought he was going to die right there. He had no vest, and shots were coming from all directions. Further, he said that he ran up to a Cleveland Police Department cruiser and then ducked down and fired a couple shots at the driver's side of the suspect vehicle. He thought that he had fired 2 shots, but found out later that he had fired 4 times. He said that once he got back around the car, he saw Officer Sistek diving down. He said that he did not know at the time if Sistek was shot or if he was just diving to get out of the way. Officer Randy Patrick also observed the subject vehicle striking Cruiser 238. He stated that as soon as the subject vehicle struck it, shots just started ringing out. He put his car in park, believing that the subjects were firing at him and his partner, Officer Paul Box. Officer Patrick stated that he went down to the floor for cover, but soon got out of the car through the driver's side. He crawled then on the ground because he said he thought he was being shot at. He looked inside Cruiser 217 and saw that it was riddled with bullets. He said that shots continued to be fired, and he had difficulty looking over the vehicle to see what was occurring because he was taking fire at the time. He got up and let some rounds off and went back on the ground again. He stated that he was about to come back up to fire again, but then everything stopped. After his weapon was inventoried, he learned that he had fired 9 rounds.